There is a specific kind of ending that hurts considerably worse than any dramatic public falling out ever could. And it is the quiet kind. The kind where someone simply stops picking up the phone, stops offering what they always used to give without being asked, and gradually stops being the one person you could genuinely count on in a crisis. This week, out of the high-stakes, heavily guarded corridors of London and Montecito, that appears to be exactly what happened between Prince Harry and the one man who had stood quietly behind Diana's son since the day she died. Are we witnessing the final, absolute collapse of Harry's remaining royal credibility? Or did he simply push the single most generous billionaire in his circle just 1 inch too far? Sir Elton John did not become part of this family's story through corporate business, through Meghan's Hollywood circle, or through anything connected to the last 5 years of Montecito reinvention. He was there decades before any of that, sitting at the piano in Westminster Abbey, rewriting his own biggest song in real time for a funeral watched by 2 billion people. But according to explosive, widely circulating leaks coming out of London this week, that specific relationship has officially hit its absolute limit. Elton has reportedly made it savage, brutal, and plain to Harry that he is not, in his own words, an active ATM. 3 words that have sent shockwaves through the royal diaspora. Not an ATM. Stick with me, because what triggered this specific £50 million legal disaster changes everything we thought we knew. There is a specific kind of internal combustion that happens when a relationship built on 30 years of unshakable historical loyalty meets the cold, hard wall of financial reality. To understand how a bond this old, this deeply sentimental, and this heavily insulated from the standard superficiality of celebrity circles actually arrives at a breaking point, you have to look past the viral headlines drifting out of the British tabloids this week, and look directly at the mechanics of the legal system that set this entire explosion in motion. We are talking about a catastrophic courtroom defeat that didn't just bruise a royal ego, but effectively triggered a financial domino effect capable of shifting the entire landscape of Montecito's high-rolling lifestyle. Just over a week ago, Prince Harry walked out of a London High Court room, having just sustained what multiple senior constitutional experts are calling the most comprehensive, public, and financially devastating legal beating of his adult life. The case itself was supposed to be his definitive masterpiece, a massive, multi-tiered privacy lawsuit launched against the publisher of the Daily Mail, designed to once and for all bring his media antagonists to their knees. Harry had systematically assembled a staggering 97 individual claims of illegal information gathering, presenting a massive mountain of allegations that spanned decades of press coverage. But when the High Court judge finally handed down his massive 436-page judgment, the result was not a triumphant victory, but an absolute, unconditional slaughter. Every single one of those 97 claims was systematically rejected, dismissed, and thrown out of court, leaving the prince standing in the wreckage of a legal strategy that had been explicitly criticized by his own private advisors long before the first gavel even struck. But the real sting of this defeat doesn't lie within the dense legal prose of the judge's ruling. It lies in the brutal, uncompromising reality of the British legal system's cost-shifting mechanics. In the United Kingdom, the prevailing rule is as simple as it is terrifying for high-stakes litigants. The loser pays. Because Harry lost this case with such spectacular, unmitigated finality, his legal team didn't just walk away with a loss. They walked away with a combined bill that industry insiders are currently estimating at a jaw-dropping £50 million. This astronomical figure includes the astronomical fees of his own elite legal counsel, led by the highly sought-after David Sherburne, combined with the equally staggering costs incurred by the defense team of the newspaper publisher. And this is exactly where the narrative shifts from a standard royal legal miscalculation into a deeply personal betrayal that has permanently ruptured the inner circle of Princess Diana's surviving confidants. Harry did not enter this legal coliseum alone. Recognizing the immense financial risk involved in taking on a massive media conglomerate, he had aggressively recruited a high-profile squad of co-claimants to stand alongside him in the trenches, giving the case the appearance of a unified celebrity crusade. This notable group included Baroness Doreen Lawrence, the highly respected civil rights campaigner, alongside Hollywood actresses Elizabeth Hurley and Sadie Frost. But sitting prominently at the top of that claimant paperwork, providing the genuine cultural and financial gravity needed to validate the entire enterprise, were the names of Sir Elton John and his husband, David Furnish. According to explosive leaks circulating widely through London's senior legal circles this week, the arrangement that brought this celebrity coalition together was built on a very specific, highly confidential financial guarantee. Multiple co-claimants, most notably Baroness Lawrence, were reportedly hesitant to expose themselves to the potentially ruinous costs of a failed high court action. To alleviate these fears and secure their participation, Harry and Elton reportedly entered into a private pact, assuring the rest of the group that they would personally absorb the entirety of the financial liability if the case went sideways. At the time, with optimism running high and the promise of a historic courtroom victory blinding everyone involved, it seemed like a safe bet. But now, the bill has arrived in full, and the brutal reality of the situation has exposed a massive, unspoken disparity between the two primary financial backers. Despite the endless public narrative surrounding Harry's massive multi-million-dollar commercial deals with global streaming giants and his record-breaking memoir, the actual liquidity of his personal fortune is vastly different from the public perception. When confronted with a sudden, immediate demand for tens of millions of pounds in liquid capital to cover a catastrophic court loss, the prince simply did not have the cash readily available. This immediate financial vacuum left exactly one person in the entire coalition with the genuine, deep-pocketed resources necessary to stop the winning side's bailiffs from knocking on the door, and it certainly wasn't the Duke of Sussex. It was Elton John, a 78-year-old musical icon, who suddenly found himself staring down a multi-million-pound bill for a legal battle that he had essentially been persuaded to join out of pure affection for Harry's late mother. The sheer scale of this financial disaster is what makes Harry's subsequent behavior look less like a strategic miscalculation and more like an act of desperate, unbridled audacity. Instead of immediately retreat to Montecito to quietly figure out a way to liquidate assets or negotiate a payment plan, the prince chose to double down on his public defiance. Within hours of the judgment being published, Harry released a blistering, highly emotional public statement that sent shockwaves through the legal establishment. He openly condemned the High Court's ruling, branding it a complete whitewash, a word that senior constitutional lawyers noted was an incredibly dangerous, unprecedented direct attack on the integrity of a British judge who had just spent 400 pages methodically detailing the exact evidentiary failures of Harry's case. But if you look closely at that furious public broadside, the most telling detail isn't what Harry wrote, but what was so conspicuously, deafeningly absent from the text. When that statement was issued to the global press, Sir Elton John and David Furnish completely refused to attach their names to it. Elton, who has spent 50 years carefully navigating his own public image and maintaining a deeply respected status within British society, reportedly drew an immediate, hard line in the sand. He refused to participate in a public tantrum against the High Court of London, effectively leaving Harry to stand completely alone in his condemnation of the judiciary. This sudden, glaring separation on the public stage was the first undeniable sign that the foundational mortar, holding this 30-year friendship together, had completely turned to dust. What happened behind closed doors next is the exact moment where the relationship officially fractured beyond all repair. With the £50 million legal bill still landing on Elton's desk like a lead weight, Harry did not offer an apology, nor did he present a plan to reimburse the legendary singer for the immense financial damage caused by his failed legal crusade. Instead, according to multiple separate, highly credible reports emerging from the inner sanctum of Elton's circle, Harry approached his mother's oldest friend with an entirely separate, massive financial request. The prince had not traveled to the United Kingdom this summer merely to witness the demise of his privacy lawsuit. He had arrived with a desperate, high-stakes agenda to secure immediate, massive corporate and personal donations for his signature charitable endeavor, the Invictus Games, which are scheduled to take place in Birmingham in 2027. The organizational committee for the Games is currently staring down a truly terrifying financial shortfall of £25 million. While they had managed to secure a baseline of £4 million from various corporate sponsors alongside an existing government grant, the entire success of the upcoming event hinged completely on Harry's ability to personally glad-hand wealthy, ultra-high net worth individuals during his brief summer visit to the UK, persuading them to instantly open their wallets and close the massive multi-million-pound gap. But as Harry moved through his exclusive network of British contacts, he found himself facing a cold, unyielding wall of rejection. The elite circles of London society, once eager to court the favor of the rebellious prince, had completely closed their ranks, leaving him increasingly isolated and desperate as the deadline for the funding window rapidly approached. In that moment of acute, high-pressure desperation, Harry made the fateful decision to turn back to the one person who had never previously said no to him. The man who had quietly functioned as his ultimate financial and emotional safety net since August of 1997. Knowing full well that Elton was already on the hook for millions of pounds in unexpected court costs due to the Daily Mail disaster, Harry reportedly walked back into Elton's private space and directly asked him to provide a massive multi-million-pound injection of personal capital to single-handedly save the Birmingham Invictus Games. It was an act of profound, almost unbelievable social and financial audacity, a move that fundamentally miscalculated the limits of an elderly man's patience and generosity. Elton John, reading the room far quicker than anyone else in Harry's immediate circle, didn't just hesitate. He delivered an immediate, devastating, and final rejection that would instantly reverberate through the grapevine of international high society. According to the highly specific leaks coming directly from people close to the singer's household, Elton did not use diplomatic language or hide behind the careful, sanitized phrasing of a public relations representative. He looked directly at the prince and delivered a brutal, four-word reality check that has since become the defining epitaph of their shattered relationship. He told him plainly, "I am not an ATM." This wasn't just a refusal to sign another check. It was a profound, deeply symbolic declaration that the legendary Bank of Elton, which had spent decades quietly funding, protecting, and bailing out various aspects of Princess Diana's younger son's life, was now permanently, unconditionally out of business. The sheer weight of those four words landed with the force of a physical blow, because they didn't just address the immediate request for Invictus funding. They cast a harsh, incredibly unflattering light on the entire dynamic that had developed between Harry and his mother's inner circle over the last several years. Elton was reportedly not just refusing the request, he was experiencing a deep, unyielding anger. An anger born from the sudden, uncomfortable realization that a legal disaster he should never have been talked into joining was going to cost him a massive fortune, only for the person who dragged him into it to turn around and demand even more money on the way out the door. To fully appreciate why this specific four-word annihilation represents such a devastating turning point, you have to realize that this was never a standard, superficial celebrity friendship built on red carpets and convenient photo opportunities. This was a relationship wrapped in the deepest, most sacred layers of modern royal history, a bond that was forged in the absolute darkest hour of Harry's childhood, making the sudden drop into cold capitalistic transactions look like a tragedy all its own. To understand the true weight of that four-word rejection, you have to look back at the historical foundation that Harry was relying on when he walked into that room. This was not a bond born out of Hollywood proximity or the sudden corporate alignments of the Montecito era. This relationship began in the absolute darkest hour of Harry's childhood, forged in the raw, public trauma of August 1997. When Princess Diana's life ended in that Parisian underpass, the world watched as two young princes were left to navigate an unimaginable grief under the unyielding glare of global media scrutiny. In those early, terrifying weeks, while the institutional machinery of Buckingham Palace scrambled to manage the constitutional fallout, it was Elton John who stepped forward to provide a genuine, deeply personal anchor for Diana's sons. He didn't do it through carefully worded press releases or distant gestures of royal condolence. He did it by sitting at the piano in Westminster Abbey, in front of a global television audience of 2 billion people, completely rewriting his most iconic song, Candle in the Wind, to serve as a direct, heartbreaking tribute to the woman he had loved as a true friend. That single performance did something that the royal establishment could not achieve. It gave voice to the raw, unspoken grief of a nation, and more importantly, it raised over $47 million for Diana's memorial fund. In the 3 decades that followed, Elton never sang that version of the song publicly again, stating repeatedly that the words belonged exclusively to her memory. That act of artistic and emotional restraint established Elton not as a casual celebrity acquaintance, but as a fierce, protective guardian of Diana's legacy and, by extension, her children. For a young Prince Harry, growing up in an environment where emotional vulnerability was often sacrificed for institutional duty, Elton John became a rare, invaluable constant. He wasn't a distant well-wisher who merely sent cards at Christmas. He was a deeply embedded, active presence in their upbringing, offering a safe space away from the suffocating pressure of royal life. David Furnish, Elton's husband, would later describe this dynamic in a formal sworn legal statement, explicitly using the phrase parental figure to characterize Elton's relationship with Harry. This is not language used lightly by elite public figures. It was a profound acknowledgement that Elton had willingly stepped into the massive, irreplaceable void left behind by Diana's tragic passing. The depth of this emotional security blanket is precisely why Harry believed he could continue to draw from it indefinitely. In his own ghostwritten memoir, Harry spoke of Elton with a tenderness that stood out drastically from the otherwise bitter, combative tone of the book. He wrote openly about his deep, unyielding love for the singer, cementing the public perception that no matter how many bridges Harry burned with his biological family in London, the bridge to Elton John would remain permanently open. This belief was validated time and again on the public stage. When Harry married Meghan Markle in 2018, Elton was not just a guest sitting in the pews. He was a central feature of the private evening reception, rising from his seat to perform Tiny Dancer specifically for the newly minted Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And when the subsequent media storm hit the couple following their dramatic exit from royal duties in 2020, Elton did not wait for his publicists to draft a safe, neutral statement. Within hours, he issued a fierce, deeply personal defense of the couple, stating publicly that he felt a profound, historic obligation to protect Harry's young family from the exact same press intrusion that he believed had directly caused Diana's death decades earlier. This long-standing pattern of unconditional public and private support is exactly what makes the sudden closing of the Bank of Elton look so devastatingly final. Harry had grown so accustomed to Elton functioning as his ultimate emotional and financial safety net that he completely failed to recognize the changing dynamics underneath the surface. The reality of Harry's post-royal life is one of intense, continuous financial pressure. While the global public looks at the massive headlines surrounding his multi-million-dollar deals with streaming giants and assumes his household is swimming in limitless liquidity, those who understand the true economics of the Montecito lifestyle paint a far more precarious picture. Detailed reporting on the prince's actual personal finances reveals that his liquid wealth separate from unverified commercial contracts sits somewhere around $22 million, a fortune that traces its roots almost entirely back to the inheritances left to him by Princess Diana and his great-grandmother, the Queen Mother. When you look at the massive operational costs of Harry's current life, that $22 million cushion begins to look alarmingly thin. The annual upkeep of his massive Montecito estate, combined with the continuous, high-grade private security team required to protect his family 24 hours a day, demands an estimated outlay of upward of $6 million every single year. This massive, non-negotiable drain on his capital has been severely exacerbated by a string of recent legal disasters. Prior to losing the massive £50 million Daily Mail case, Harry had already sustained a major courtroom defeat in his separate legal battle against the UK Home Office regarding his taxpayer-funded security arrangements when visiting Britain. That loss didn't just strip him of his official protection. It left him with an immediate, court-ordered bill of close to £1.5 million to cover the government's legal expenses. With his capital reserves actively draining and his global commercial ventures showing clear signs of stagnation, evidenced by the quiet termination of his high-profile Spotify deal and the mounting pressure on his remaining production contracts, Harry arrived in London this summer facing a genuine, acute cash crunch. He desperately needed a massive, high-profile victory to restore his public standing and validate his aggressive legal strategy. Instead, he walked into a total courtroom annihilation that not only exposed his financial vulnerability, but actively dragged his most loyal, wealthy protector into the financial line of fire. The £50 million bill generated by the Daily Mail publisher's total victory was the spark that lit the fuse, But it was Harry's immediate reaction to the crisis that turned a financial problem into an absolute social catastrophe. When Harry chose to ignore the private warnings of senior legal experts and launch his furious public attack on the High Court judge, branding the entire verdict a whitewash, he was operating under the assumption that his celebrity coalition would follow him blindly into the fray. He expected Elton John to stand beside him, reinforcing the narrative that they were both victims of a corrupt, institutional conspiracy designed to protect the British tabloids. But Elton, viewing the situation through the lens of a seasoned, 78-year-old elder statesman who had spent decades building a respected legacy, saw the situation for what it truly was: a reckless, legally ungrounded tantrum that threatened to damage the reputation of everyone associated with it. By refusing to attach his name to Harry's statement, Elton didn't just distance himself from the prince's words. He effectively signaled to the entire British legal and social establishment that he was no longer willing to underwrite Harry's personal vendettas. The tension generated by this public separation set the stage for the fateful meeting that would permanently shatter the 30-year bond. Harry, completely misreading Elton's public silence as mere administrative delay rather than a profound ideological shift, walked into the singer's private space with his £25 million Invictus Games shortfall burning a hole in his agenda. He believed that the historical weight of their relationship, combined with Elton's deep, proven commitment to Diana's legacy, would override any immediate discomfort regarding the mounting court costs. He presented the request for the Birmingham 2027 funding not as a desperate plea for a bailout, but as a golden opportunity for Elton to once again cement his status as the ultimate patron of Diana's son's achievements. It was a catastrophic miscalculation of human psychology and financial patience. Elton John was already dealing with the sobering reality that his willingness to support Harry's legal ambitions was going to cost him millions of pounds of his own personal wealth, money that would be paid directly to the very newspaper publishers he had spent his life detesting. To be asked, in that exact moment of financial bruising, to immediately turn around and sign another massive, multi-million-pound check for a completely unrelated charitable project was an act of audacity that Elton simply could not overlook. The legendary singer looked at the prince who had transitioned from a grieving boy needing protection into a combative, middle-aged man demanding financial tribute, and delivered the definitive four-word verdict that would instantly close the account. The statement "I am not an ATM" was not just a rejection of a specific funding request. It was a total, comprehensive dismantling of Harry's operational model, a reality check delivered by the only man alive who had the historical authority to say it. And as that door began to quietly close in London, the shockwaves of this historic rupture immediately began traveling 5,000 miles across the Atlantic, heading straight toward the isolated luxury of Montecito, where an entirely new financial and marital crisis was already waiting to boil over. The immediate fallout of that devastating four-word rejection did not stay confined within the private walls of London's elite meeting rooms. It immediately traveled 5,000 miles across the Atlantic, crashing directly into the isolated luxury of the Montecito mansion where Meghan Markle was reportedly watching the entire British summer campaign unfold with growing alarm. For years, the public narrative surrounding the Duke and Duchess of Sussex has been one of unbreakable, unified defiance against the outside world. A carefully curated image of two people standing shoulder to shoulder against international scrutiny, global media houses, and the rigid constraints of the British royal family. But according to highly specific leaks emerging from the inner circle of their California household this week, the sheer scale of the Daily Mail courtroom disaster, combined with the sudden, catastrophic alienation of Elton John, has triggered a massive, unprecedented crisis behind closed doors. Meghan was reportedly deeply, genuinely angry that Harry chose to pursue this massive legal gamble in the first place, watching from afar as her husband systematically burned through both millions of dollars in liquid capital and the single most valuable, historically significant relationship remaining on his contact list. The strategic calculations within the Montecito household have always relied on maintaining a high-grade network of ultra-wealthy, influential global champions, power players who could validate their brand, fund their charitable endeavors, and provide the immense cultural gravity needed to sustain their elite lifestyle outside the royal fold. But the sudden brutal exit of Elton John from their inner circle has exposed a dangerous, systemic pattern that has slowly been consuming Harry and Meghan's social network over the last several years. Within international media circles, this phenomenon has grown common enough to earn its own sharp, defining shorthand term, getting markled. It describes a highly specific, recognizable social cycle where individuals begin as the couple's most visible, enthusiastic, and passionate public defenders, only for something to subtly shift underneath the surface, leading to a sudden, absolute, and unexplained erasure from the guest list. The global public has watched this exact script play out with some of the biggest names in modern entertainment and culture. The Beckhams, Oprah Winfrey, the Clooneys. All of them were once pillars of absolute, unyielding loyalty to the Sussex brand, standing prominently at royal weddings, hosting them on private estates, and underwriting their public narratives, right up until the exact moment that loyalty suddenly, quietly stopped. But Elton John was never supposed to be just another name on that revolving celebrity list. He wasn't a Hollywood contact acquired through corporate networking or a strategic alliance built on mutual public relations benefits. He was the foundational rock of Harry's emotional security, the final living thread connecting the prince directly back to the unconditioned affection of his late mother, Princess Diana. By drawing a 78-year-old musical icon into a toxic, legally ungrounded £50 million courtroom catastrophe, and then immediately turning around to demand an additional £25 million for a separate charitable project, Harry didn't just miscalculate his financial position, he completely shattered the emotional goodwill that had kept that historic door open since August of 1997. The image currently circulating through the upper echelons of international society is one that deeply damages Harry's carefully cultivated public image. A young, able-bodied prince, the grandson of a queen, arriving at the doorstep of an elderly man who is openly managing his own declining health and failing eyesight, not to offer comfort or support, but to aggressively demand another massive check to cover his own operational shortfalls. This brings the entire narrative down to a cold, incredibly uncomfortable calculation regarding Harry's actual long-term sustainability on the global stage. For years, his public platform has been built on a foundation of continuous grievance, a relentless, multi-year campaign fought against the British tabloid press, the institutional constraints of Buckingham Palace, and the specific individuals he holds responsible for the traumas of his past. But as the High Court judge systematically picked apart and rejected every single one of his 97 individual privacy claims, the legal establishment effectively signaled that the era of relying on historical emotional trauma to win complex, modern legal battles is officially over. Harry is no longer a young, grieving prince shielded by the protective arms of his mother's wealthiest friends. He is a middle-aged man standing alone in a cold financial landscape, facing mounting millions in court-ordered debts, a draining inheritance, and a catastrophic loss of institutional and personal backing. The ultimate tragedy of the Bank of Elton formally closing its account isn't just found in the staggering multi-million-pound numbers sitting on that high court bill. It is found in the total, absolute isolation that follows an act of profound social audacity. When Princess Diana's closest surviving confidant decides quietly, cleanly, and without any public drama that enough is finally, unconditionally enough, it raises a terrifying, unavoidable question that nobody in Montecito seems willing to voice out loud. If a man who spent 30 years publicly placing his own name, wealth, and reputation between Diana's children and the harsh realities of the world can be pushed to the point of delivering a brutal, for-word reality check like "I am not an ATM," who exactly is left standing to hold the door open for Prince Harry when the next crisis inevitably hits? The legal bills are continuing to climb. The global commercial streaming contracts are showing undeniable signs of irreversible stagnation, and the final living link to his mother's inner circle has quietly walked away from the table. This leaves the Duke of Sussex facing an incredibly stark, unyielding reality as he looks toward the future. He can no longer navigate international society under the assumption that his royal title functions as an elite, unlimited line of personal credit, or that the deep sentimental memories of his childhood will permanently insulate him from the consequences of reckless financial and legal miscalculations. The closing of the Bank of Elton is the definitive signal that the historical capital Harry has been drawing from for 3 decades has finally run completely dry. As the dust settles on this catastrophic British summer campaign, The prince is left to discover the hardest lesson of his adult public life. That some relationships, once burned through out of pure, unbridled audacity, cannot be restored by any amount of money, any streaming deal, or any corporate public relations strategy. The door has closed, the music has stopped, and for the first time in his life, the prince is truly, completely on his own. And that is exactly the question I want to hand over to you directly, because I believe thoughtful people can look at this massive fallout and land in entirely different places. Tell me honestly in the comments section below. Do you believe Sir Elton John has finally seen something real, transactional, and deeply unflattering in the man Harry has quietly become over these past few years? Or do you think a genuinely decent, aging musical icon was simply pulled into a toxic, multi-million-pound legal mess he never should have agreed to bankroll in the first place, and did exactly what any sensible person would do by drawing a hard line in the sand? The implications of this broken friendship go far beyond the standard viral headlines. They signal a permanent shift in how the world views the Sussex brand, and your voice matters in parsing out the truth behind this historic rupture. If this deep dive gave you real, unfiltered context rather than just the superficial gossip circulating online, do not forget to smash that like button right now to help this channel reach more people who are looking for the absolute reality behind these elite circles. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your post notifications so you never miss our breaking investigative breakdowns, and drop your raw thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, keep questioning the narrative, and I will see you in the very next video.